And welcome to yet another episode of This All Stops When We Start Talking About It. I want to thank those of you that have continued to tune in. I really appreciate you, but I want to remind you of what my goal is for this project. I am trying diligently to get assistance from a federal investigator or from an investigatory journalist who will be willing to help us so that we can get assistance. The clients are still unprotected, and I am in the state of Kansas. My career has been destroyed because of this. And so I would like to ask you, first of all, to please share this because I'm hoping that someone will see it that can help me. Secondly, if you have had similar experiences to what I'm discussing, now is the time. I have people paying attention to us. I know that a lot of you are living in a culture of fear there. And the only way that we're going to stop this is by talking about it. So we need to get our tips over to the FBI. So if you or someone you know has had an experience that you believe could be public corruption or some sort of wrongful law enforcement misconduct, please report it to the FBI. You can do that at tips.fbi.gov. They can ignore me, but they can't ignore all of us. So please, please, please share this, spread this, like this. I know you might be afraid to share it publicly, and that's fine. I'm not asking you to do that. But if you could do it through direct messenger or private messenger so that it's getting to the people it needs to get to, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna pick up with part three. I initially said I think this is going to be a three-parter, but I think it's unfortunately going to have to be a four-part. So we're going to get through another 30 minutes of this, and here we go. So if you remember where we had left off, the sheriff had been caught by me forging a warrant. He had illegally arrested the woman, or his office had. And as a result of that, I was threatened. As a result of me trying to get help, I was threatened by the DA's office essentially in a group email where they defamed me, called me mentally ill. And I'm like, okay, you guys are stupid. So I had already told the sheriff the reason I wanted the report from the phone call back on November 6th in the first place is so I could file for civil contempt. Because at this point in time, I had a number of protection order violations. And because my client's protection order was a civil protection order issued through his divorce case, I was allowed to pursue civil contempt. So I attempted to get the record from the sheriff. Now, just so you know, under the Colorado Opens Records Act and the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act, generally you're supposed to receive records within 72 hours of request or a written statement from the record keeper, which here would be Don Wilson, as to why it can't be provided to me and what happened with the evidence. I did eventually get the record of the call and the report, but I think it took me about 15 days, far beyond the 72 hours. But nevertheless, I was able to file for my civil contempt proceeding. And so I put that in there. My client had to have the Dolores County Sheriff's Office serve her with the document because they're the only agency that has service there. And I know that they did try to give him a hard time. They weren't willing to accept his money. And eventually they did get her served, but they claimed they couldn't find her again. They knew exactly where she lived because my client had reported that because she moved across the street from the elementary school, place her and her daughter were prohibited from being because of the protection order and his grandson being on it. And he had reported that to Don Wilson, and Don Wilson did nothing about it. So they knew exactly where she lived. She lived about a quarter mile from the sheriff's office, and it took him a while to serve her, but they eventually did get her served. That didn't stop her from continuing to harass my client. In fact, we believe she had a tracker on my client's truck. He would be driving on back roads and she would suddenly show up behind him. She followed him home a number of times. Anytime he was in Cortez, he would see her vehicle. He knew her vehicle because she'd gotten in the divorce. He offered it to her and paid it off so that she could have a free vehicle. She traded it in for a fancier car. Um, but she had a completely paid off vehicle. Um, but regardless, she was continuing to do stuff. So my client and I, we didn't meet ever in Dolores County because we didn't feel like we would be safe there. And so we would have a habit of meeting in local restaurants because at this point in time, I don't have an office. I'm trying to quit the practice of law. And so we would meet sometimes at Blondie's Trophy Room. Well, somehow she found out we were meeting there. One day we were meeting there. I believe it was around December 17th because I sat down with my client and said, we need to file a complaint to the Victims' Rights Act Board. They've absolutely violated your rights, the sheriff's and the DA's office. You have certain rights that are attached to you because you're a victim. So we were sitting there. We were in the front of the Blondie's Trophy Room. I had my back to the windows and he was facing out towards Main Street. And I noticed that he had a disturbed look on his face. And I said, what's going on? And he told me that while we'd been sitting there, he noticed his wife and his ex-stepdaughter circling the block over and over and over again. He said, they know we're here. And he didn't know what to do. He was kind of nervous. And so at first I thought, man, maybe she drove by once and he's just saying things. But sure enough, I turned around and watched her continue to circle the block over and over and over and over. And I got mad. So I stepped out the front door of Blondie's, stepped between two cars, waited till they come back around the block again, and I took photos of them, snapped them. They saw me take them. They drove off, peeled off as soon as they saw me. My client, I immediately went over to the Cortez Police Department. We reported it there. The officer that we spoke with, Officer Yen, was very nice to us. He was very professional, very polite. He did take a report. He did go out and check my client's truck for a tracker, and seemed like he was going to take us seriously. But the district attorney's office declined to do anything because they claimed that it was a public street and she was allowed to be there, which I don't dispute. That's not true. That's not true. However, she did have a 100-yard distance provision from him, and she was prohibited from stalking him, which she was clearly doing. After he left the Cortez Police Department, she followed him home all the way to Duff Creek. So we were pretty frustrated. And at this point in time, I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do here? I don't even know if Judge Margison knows that his signature was forged. I'll be honest, I don't think he does. I think he might know now if he's watched these videos, but I don't think he did. That being said, I knew that there was a friend of his, a colleague of his, a former colleague and friend, who wasn't affiliated with the courts and wasn't affiliated with the district attorney's office. And I thought, okay, maybe this person who's a friend of his can tell him what's going on, because I didn't feel like I could go there because I was worried about getting fictitious charges for threatening a judge or retaliating or something like that, because I believe that's exactly what they were trying to set me up for. Witness tampering, whatever. So I asked this gentleman, hey, I've got some information and I would like to meet with you. I'd like to give you what I have because I think that this is really important and I think it needs to be relayed to the judge. I did not meet that person in Montezuma or Dolores Counties because I didn't want anybody to see us meeting together because I didn't know who to trust. And I met him in Durango at a Durango Joe's. I relayed the information about this case to him. I even included him in an email with my client, excuse me, about this case. And I went ahead and basically told him what had happened and said, please tell Matt, I'm worried. He's a brand new judge. They're gonna ruin his career on the bench. Like, this is not okay. This is bad. And I didn't hear from that guy for about 10 days, but then when I finally heard from him, he told me, oh, don't worry. I talked to him. He signed it. He keeps a logbook of warrants underneath his desk, and he can't see it right now. He's going to have to drive out to Dolores County to look at that, but he verified it. I didn't even respond to the guy. I just blocked him. I was like, all right, you idiot. I took the same test as you dummy. And so I don't know exactly what happened, and I don't know what level of interaction that person has with the district attorney's office, but on January 5th, my client got an email from the DA's office telling him, oh, don't worry, we talked to the judge and there's a secret, like, subpoena proof logbook, my words, not theirs, that he keeps of warrants. And yeah, it's right. Now, I don't know why the DA's office would be so boldly stupid, because first of all, you can't speak to a judge outside of a court proceeding in a case you're involved in. That's called ex parte communication, and it's highly, highly against the rules. Secondly, let's put our thinking caps on for 1 second. You're trying to tell me there's a secret subpoena proof logbook that nobody else can see, but it overrides the official court record? Give it a rest, guys. We know you lied. It's insane. I told my client, this is nuts. Now, on the same day, I got a call from Renew. I have worked for Renew, the domestic violence agency, I think, as pretty much their only attorney since 2015. I tried to get other attorneys to take over for me. They never lasted, and I always ended up going back. I worked for Renew for a long time. It was a steeply discounted position. We had $8,000 grant that had to spread over everybody in the entire county for the entire year. So while most attorneys were making $300, $400 an hour, I was making $85 to $100 an hour doing those jobs. And I didn't mind doing it at first, but it got to be emotionally draining. I saw suicides. I saw what I believe to be murders, tons of trauma. And for a long time, I wanted to walk away from Cortez, but I didn't, because I knew how bad things were there for domestic violence victims. And I felt this sort of sense of guilt. that I knew what would happen to them if I walked away. But on January 5th, I got a phone call from the interim director of Renew, who tried to extort my private attorney files in this case and another case from Dolores County, and told me essentially that she would withhold my final paycheck from 2023 and my tax papers if I didn't give them to her. At which point I told her to get bent. I knew it was doing. She mentioned the names of a couple people who were behind this request, including the gentleman that I had spoke to in December that didn't work for the DA's office and didn't work for the court system, as the basis behind their decision. And I realized, oh my God, I'm not paranoid. I am part of a conspiracy and I'm the victim. So I went on Facebook that day and I posted a generic post. Hey, folks, if you do anything with tax preparation, what should you do if a nonprofit's withholding your 1099? The next day, I got contacted by her again, claiming that I was harassing them by telephone and defaming them in a Facebook post. It's funny, the harassing emails and phone calls thing started about November 14th of 2023, around the time I witnessed them forging the warrant. The DA's office accused me of that. The judge started accusing me of that in other cases. Opposing parties that I'm discussing in these things started claiming that I was harassing them by email and phone when I didn't have any contact with them, or I was just sending professional emails to the agencies. But yeah, this woman claimed that I harassed her and defamed her because of my Facebook post. And I said, first of all, that post doesn't mention anybody. Secondly, why are you spying on my Facebook? But third of all, if you think that post is about you, you might want to change your tune, because otherwise I'm going to take you to small claims court and I'm going to turn you into the IRS for basically retaliating against me because I'm refusing to provide you attorney-client privilege documents and attorney work product. And I got a letter from Renew with my paper and my check, thanking me for my service and dismissing me. And it was professionally a little devastating, but personally it was relieving because I couldn't do that job anymore. They were making it impossible for me to do it. And that guilt that I felt about leaving was my concern that I would destroy the agency if I left, but they destroyed it for me, so I didn't have to. And if you guys wondered why Renew was closed at the beginning of 2024, well, here's why. Here it is. So, anyways, let's see here. We had filed the contempt. And we did have a return date hearing in January, for what's called a contempt advisement. That's essentially where the judge basically reads what the person's accused of doing and asks them if they admit or deny. Of course, she denied it. But what was really interesting about that particular matter was Judge First required my client to remove certain portions of his complaints against her, claiming that she couldn't be both criminally tried for something and civilly tried for something at the same time, which is absolutely 100% a total lie and not true whatsoever. But because he was not going to allow us to go forward unless I removed those portions of the complaint, he coerced us into removing them. I said, fine. And he also said, don't worry, if she's not convicted of the things that I'm making you remove, I'll allow you to re-add them to the case when we have the hearing. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll play the game, because I didn't want to file. I can't file for an appeal at this point in time. It's not a final order from the judge. I really don't have any options besides just following his advice or asking him to remove himself from the case. And there's no other judges that handle district court cases in Dolores County, so I removed the complaints. I did it, remembering that he told me we can re-add them if she's not convicted. So we got set for a return date of February. She was allowed to apply for an attorney because we were seeking punitive contempt. We were asking for her to do jail time because of what she had done. And so the first attorney that was hired, I had already spoken to that gentleman, that attorney, about this case. And so he essentially was conflicted off. I wasn't doing that to conflict him off. I was just trying to get advice because I didn't know what to do. And I sometimes call colleagues that I, have a good relationship with to say, hey, this happened. What do I do? And so he withdrew from the case. And suddenly, Judge First appointed the gentleman I spoke to in December in Durango, who was also a friend of his. And I can tell you, under the judicial canons, the judge should have never appointed this person because of their previous relationship. But I didn't bring that up because I knew that this person was conflicted off the case because my client had emailed him the information and he had previous information about the case. So I contacted that person. I'm leaving their name out selectively. Um, Draw your own conclusions on who you think it is. But I contacted that person and I said, "Do you think that you should be handling this case? I believe you're conflicted off." And he said, "Nope, no conflict." So I'm like, okay, do I report him to attorney ethics? I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going to happen. Fine, whatever. I'll let it go. Now, in the meantime, the wife had gotten a job at Blondie's Trophy Room to prevent us from going there. As soon as we turned in that situation in December, I think the very next day she went and applied for a job there. She also applied for a part-time job at Bangor Sports Bar, and her granddaughter applied for a job at the State Line, effectively trying to prevent him from going to any restaurants or bars that he normally frequented. Um, I realized she started working there, and I never set foot in that place again because I was like, I'm not going to let her poison my food or drink because I believe she would have done that. I think that's precisely why she was getting the jobs at all these places to slip something in our food or drink so that we could get pulled over for a DUI. And I went in one time. I sat down and ordered breakfast, and I put every version of Evil Woman on the jukebox I possibly could. And then I never ate there again. I did contact the owner of Blondie's Trophy Room to let him know, hey, you should know that this person got a job there to prevent us from going there, and they have criminal charges. And I was doing it as a courtesy. On January 18th, the wife tried to file a protection order against me, claiming that I was going into Blondie's daily, harassing her, and trying to get her fired from her job by contacting the owner by excessive text messages. Matt Margison wisely denied that protection order. I'm glad he did. But at this point in time, I'm like, okay, I every single place I turn, I'm literally getting hit in the face because these women are terrorizing me too now, this woman, along with the sheriff's office. And that's when I decided that I needed to get out of town and leave. I told my clients, hey, I don't think that you're going to win if I'm your attorney. I think they're going to find a way to make sure you lose because they're trying to bankrupt me and they're trying to ruin my reputation and my career. Also, during this time, Judge First had started calling me names in other hearings. He was calling me antagonistic when I wasn't speaking. He was prohibiting me from practicing law in other cases. And I didn't know why Judge First started doing that to me. His behavior changed drastically to me in November of 2023, right around the 14th of November. I think it's because he was trying to protect all of his buddies. And so, what better way to do that than to make the one woman who's trying to prevent all this from happening look like a crazy nut job and then let her be targeted and give her no protection? It was very, very professionally and personally devastating to me. It was one of the most insulting things I've ever gone through. And I hope someday the Colorado legislature will write laws to prevent stuff like this from happening to women because I had no help. I couldn't get assistance from anybody. And the one place that I had that was kind of a support system to me was Renew. I liked those women, and suddenly they all turned on me. But can't keep someone down for long, I guess. I told my client, listen, you need to get a different lawyer. And he said, no, I want to stick with you. It's just a contempt hearing. And so I went back and forth. I moved to Kansas in the meantime. I was a little nervous about getting out of there. I didn't know how to get out of there because I had hit a deer with my car on November 5th. By February 1st, my car was still not fixed and it was in the shop. I was given a number of excuses of why it was in the shop. And I was feeling paranoid at this point because I'm thinking, oh my God, did they do something? Are they making a deal with this small shop to prevent me from getting my vehicle? So I bought a Honda Element for $1,000, an old one with 200,000 miles on it. And I loaded up as much of my stuff as I possibly could. And I left the state. I left my car and all my stuff in Colorado because I didn't feel safe. And my client said, I don't want to go forward without you. But I said, well, your hearing's not until April. Let's see what happens. Something strange happened at the end of January, and I received a phone call from the district attorney's office. I know their number by heart, and they hadn't talked to me since they all attacked me in November. And I thought it was weird. I answered the phone, and it was Clarissa, the office administrator that I mentioned previously. And she was contacting me to ask me if I possibly had a copy of the flash drive from Bangor Sports Bar because Sheriff Wilson had never picked it up, like I told them. And they were about to get in trouble with the court and the public defender because they had not turned the video over in the course of discovery. So her case was about to get dismissed. So I think at this point, the DA's office, instead of just doing the right thing, thought, okay, cool, we'll cover it up and we'll get the evidence from her. I will admit I was not very nice to that person on the phone. I told her, do not ever call me again, everything by email. I will never speak to your office again. And she again gave me the story about the warrant and the secret logbook. And I was like, this is ridiculous. You guys, do you realize how insulting to my intelligence you're being? I understand what you guys did. I get what happened. But I did have a copy of the flash drive, and she asked me if I'd be willing to bring it in. I said, if you think I'm setting foot in your office, get a clue. Never going in there. You guys will set me up and you all lie about me. But my client was willing to take it over. He was the victim, you know? So I made a copy of it for my client and I provided it to him. Again, if you know anything about criminal defense, you should understand there's a significant chain of custody issue here because I got it from my client got it from the bar. Then my client gave it to me. Then I made a copy for him, and then he took it back to the DA's office. I don't believe the woman's public defender was ever notified of that. I don't believe they ever told him. Anyways, regardless, my client went to go deliver the piece of evidence in January that was supposed to be picked up on November to the DA's office, and they would not let him in. They wanted him to just drop it in a drop box, and he said, absolutely not. I'm going to make sure this gets to somebody. And if I remember correctly, they made him sit there for over an hour, treated him like he was a criminal. Great DA's office we got. So I did have to go back periodically for court hearings, and I happened to be back in April. We continued the hearing in April because I had to have a medical procedure. Our hearing was set for April 19th, but then I had to go back there for a hearing April 24th or somewhere thereabouts. And while I was there, my client was subject to another violation of protection order. He really enjoys car racing, and he was at the Aztec track racing his vehicle. And as he came off the track from one of his races, he was basically surrounded by the Aztec Police Department. I don't know if they had guns drawn or not, but somebody had called in a report that he was prolifically drunk and drinking and driving while he was racing his car. And my client was so upset. His family saw it, his kids saw it, all the people from Aztec who didn't know what was going on in Dolores County saw it. He was very embarrassed. And 7 officers basically surrounding him, interrogating him when he was just trying to participate in an activity that he and his family enjoyed was really, really, really humiliating to him. So he asked me, he knew it was her. He knew that she's the one that did it. And so I drove down to Aztec and paid $40 to get a recording of this 911 call. And as soon as I played it, she has a very distinctive voice. We knew it was her. She lied and claimed that she was there with her husband and she was really worried for the safety of her and her grandchildren because this man was terrorizing people on the track. We turned that recording over to the sheriff in a joint email with the DA and everybody attached. He's like, well, it's not a violation. And my client, who at this point is advocating for himself because everything I send gets thrown in the garbage, wrote back and said, Your Honor, or excuse me, Sheriff, this is a violation. She's not allowed to contact me. She's not allowed to harass me. She's not allowed to intimidate me. She's not allowed to use third parties to intimidate me. And then the sheriff said, well, it might be a violation, but it's not under our jurisdiction. You have to file it in Aztec. And my client, again, who knew the law at this point, said, Sheriff, that's not true. You can file it a case wherever the action occurred, which would be Aztec, or where the protection order was issued, which would be Dolores County. And the sheriff told him again in an email, we're not going to do anything. And since the DA was attached, I think the DA realized, now we get what's going on. And they suddenly were willing to talk to him. However, Christian Hatfield threatened him that he was going to investigate him for allegations that the wife had made against him. And my client defended himself and said, "Why are you going to investigate me? I'm turning in violations of protection order per the law. I'm the victim. Why are you doing this?" And then Christian Hatfield disappeared, and they assigned Ron Colquitt to the case. Um, it was a nightmare. They were just giving him the runaround. So they set her criminal hearings for the 14th. At this point in time, she's got 4 open criminal cases for violation of protection order, and they're trying to offer her a plea deal through her public defender. So we set the contempt citation for after the criminal sentencing date was supposed to occur, because the judge told us if she wasn't sentenced on certain things, we could add them back to the case. And the things that they were proposing to sentence her on were new violations of the protection order, not the things that the judge made us remove. So she had a criminal plea date set for May 14th. And on that date, she took a plea. Ian McLaren was the new judge, and to Judge McLaren's credit, he definitely noticed there was something kind of fishy with this case. And why hasn't this woman, why are we here with 4 protection order violations and we're offering her diversion to 1? They did go back and forth, but on that day, they accepted her plea deal and they set her over for a date of sentencing. And I'm like, okay, cool. We got to change the contempt citation. Our hearing was set for May 17th. So I let the attorney that was appointed to that case, to the civil case, know, hey, I know you weren't involved at the time the judge said this, but he allowed us permission. He granted us permission already to amend the complaint. We're adding these things back in because she wasn't convicted of them. And that's where we're going to stop today. I'll pick it up for the final leg of this thing. All right. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.